Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Kognito product overview webinar. We're really excited to discuss our current suite, as well as share with you some of the additional products you can anticipate will release a little bit later this year. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Kim Wieland and Dr. Darren Jones. Kim Wieland is our head of product for the education vertical, and previously she served in a senior role on our client experience team. Kim's career includes roles in education, business, and nonprofits, with a focus on helping communities build capacity to address the challenges and opportunities at the local level. Dr. Darren Jones is the manager of strategic initiatives and partnerships here at Kognito. And prior to joining us, he served as the associate vice president of student engagement at Mary Baldwin University. There, he held roles within student affairs and he worked across areas such as orientation, retention programs, student life activities, fraternity and sorority affairs, intervention services, academic advising, leadership, community standards, as well as Title IX. Welcome, Kim. Welcome, Darren. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to hear about Kognito and exciting things that we have and that is coming up in the future. So I'm going to take you through a little bit about who Kognito is for those that are new, and welcome back for those that are familiar with Kognito. But a little bit about our mission, which is to combine the science of learning, the art of conversation, and the power of virtual humans to measurably improve social, emotional, and physical health. And leaning into that art of conversation, we're really using this idea of game design and game theory to think innovatively on how do we impact campus and communities and increase that sense of belonging, also that culture of care on college campuses. And a piece of doing this, we have compiled for you a whole entire student wellness and campus climate program bundle. And the whole idea behind this is how do we empower faculty, staff, and students to take an active role in creating those healthy and safe campus environments. So one thing you will notice about Kognito's products and our training programs is that it's evidence-based experiential simulations. And the beauty of it is that it's offering those personalized and private practice opportunities to upskill in the areas of communication. And it's aimed at promoting healthy behaviors and reducing harmful ones. And so using that platform, we started with mental health and well-being and actually originated with the Virginia Tech shootings for those that remember that. Our two founders actually came together to understand, well, how can we create a program or what can we create that allows faculty and staff the ability to engage with students in a way that shows them that they supporting them and that they care. So mental health and well-being is where it started, and we adapted that methodology and that learning model and platform into a number of different topics that you see before you. So starting with mental health and well-being, then we expanded into sexual misconduct prevention, alcohol and other drugs, and you're going to learn about our newest offerings in prescription drugs and DEI as well. So I'm very, very excited to share with you all what we have in store and some of the results that we've seen thus far when it comes down to our programs. So a little bit about the impact. When you think about that end in mind, what did we want for our simulations and our programs and what type of impact that we wanted to see? And we're proud to say we have a large amount of educators and students that have engaged with our simulations. And what that means is that there's a cultural shift that is able to happen once these trainings and this information and the upskilling individuals are able to upskill even more. So a couple things that you see before you, we focus on the competency areas when it comes down to these topic areas. And so what we see is there's a statistically significant increase in individuals' confidence and preparedness to have conversations. Now, it may not necessarily be difficult for everyone, but just because it's not difficult doesn't mean it's effective. And where we lean into with our training programs is how do we upskill folks to have effective conversations around these sensitive topics? A big piece of what we offer and very important for us as a company is assessment. And so what we will find, you see the statistically significant increases, we extend beyond satisfaction. We always hear great feedback when it comes down to the experience of our products. People love it because it's engaging. I'll talk a little bit about that. And it's relevant to the times. We pride ourselves on being, keeping our ear to the ground, really talking to faculty, staff, and students to knowing what is the current dynamics in higher education. And I know it always shifts with the different generations that are coming through. We have gone through a lot in the past couple years, and it's important for us as a company to make sure that what we offer is relevant to that time. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about why schools trust Kognito. And trust is the operative word, right? There's a lot behind that. And one piece behind the trust is the ability to deliver results. So you see a couple different areas that are really important for us that we want you to leave with on what is exciting about Kognito. What is the value add with partnering with us? The first thing I'll talk about is the practice base. This is what I consider to be our leading differentiator. There's a lot of amazing programs out there that universities, colleges and universities can take advantage of to really disseminate information. All doing great work, right? Very impactful work. But where Kognito sits is really that practice base. And so there's an idea of knowing, you know better, you do better. Which that's not always a strong connection right there, because there's something in the middle. And it's the secret sauce that Kognito really sits in this place of, in order to do better, we want people to feel confident and prepared to step into these spaces of action. With doing that, we know that a part of upskilling is practice, right? And so we have extensive research that shows how that emotional engagement really connects to that reflective thinking, and also that strong self-efficacy, and that leads to behavior change. And that's what's very important for us. Knowledge acquisition is one thing, but what we want is behavior change, because it's the behavior that shifts the culture. And we were talking about that culture of care. Me, as a person that has worked in higher education, has been the only career that I've had, I know how important that web of support has been for students to increase retention, sustain, cultivate, and increase retention, persistence, and graduation rates, which if you think about it, higher the graduation rates, the more alumni and they give back, right? So we talk about this cycle of investment that is here. Dynamic learning is definitely a key factor when it comes down to Kognito solutions, because the scenarios and the platform adapts to the learner. So what you will find that within these practice scenarios, there's dynamic learning when it comes down to those conversation pathways. We pride ourselves on being research proven. You saw on a previous slide, it was evidence-based. So we use evidence-based communication skills that's embedded within our simulations. But the beauty of what we offer is that it is research proven. We're grateful that the founder is the director of research as well, and a faculty member, has published multiple articles regarding this technology and the use of virtual humans to upskill individuals. And so we have data upon data upon data, and it speaks loudly when it comes down to the efficacy of what we offer. That can't translate to that measurable impact, right? We can directly say, correlate to the amount of people that have taken it and that behavior change. And also what's important as we think about just staffing trends within higher education, staffing structures have shifted. And it's important to really focus on a solution that is scalable. I mean, we'll talk about scalable, number of different use cases that we'll hope to get into a little later. But when it comes down to being able to implement a trusted solution at scale and very quickly, Kognito sits in a very good position to do just that. And I'll, wrap that up with saying, it's easy to think about these scenarios, and once you get a demo and you experience what it is, we really tap the field to get these scenarios and get the input and guidance when it comes down to the instructional design and the building of the characters, the scenery, and everything that you would experience. And what's important about that is that we want to keep the people that are on the ground tightly integrated into how we build this. So it's not an instructional design team in a corner saying, oh, well, this would be a nice scenario. We think that they're experiencing this. No, we actually talk from the lived experiences of faculty, staff, and students, and have them a part of the process along the entire way. The design process is so iterative and so thoughtful and meaningful. Once you experience the conversation through the topics, you can definitely see how it directly relates to that experience and how the voices were included as well. So I'm gonna pass it off to my amazing colleague, Kim, who is our head of product, and is definitely one of the key people that is involved in designing. So Kim, if you have something to add when it comes down to why schools trust Kognito, that'll be great. And then we can go and talk about the product portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to hit back on some of the things that you said. I love about my job in the product role is that I get to work so closely with our partners, and my job is really to listen. It's to listen to the schools that we work with, to listen to faculty and staff, to listen to the students. And so every program that we have added, it is because we have heard in those listening sessions and the conversations that we have that there's a need. There's a need for a specific skill, a specific type of conversation. And so we don't just build topics to build topics. We do it because we believe, based on those conversations, that there is something that we can bring to the table with our practice scenarios, that dynamic learning where you're receiving feedback and really focusing on skills-based conversations. And so I'm excited to talk about some that we've added and some that we have coming that we are really focusing in, again, as I said, on those practice scenarios and really focusing on that behavior change, as Darren said. I'll start with the two that have actually just launched not very long ago. We actually just completed a trial out to schools for this. I'm excited about both of these. Cultivating Inclusive Communities is specifically for faculty and staff. This program is really focused around the idea of creating these campuses where we're bringing in inclusion and belonging, and we'll talk a little bit more about the conversation that is specifically in that one and the goals of that, and then prescription drugs, which is specifically for students and adds on to what we started with our alcohol and other drugs program. That's specifically more around prescription drugs, but then does have more practice scenarios around those types of refusal skills and other things that we focused in on alcohol and other drugs. If you go to the next slide, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the goals of those and the actual practice scenarios. So what I love about what we do around alcohol and other drugs, and we carried through into this prescription drugs one, is that we know that just say no does not work. So each of these is built to focus on what are the types of skills that students can use to really make decisions around use. And in here, we're focusing on diversion and making sure that students who have a prescription understand how to use refusal skills to not divert. And for those who might not have a prescription, what are some of those types of things that they're doing in those conversations that may put pressure on others. We focus a lot on the types of communication that's already happening every day on campuses. This one was based specifically off of a lot of research that was done by one of our SMEs about the types of conversations. That research was based on interviewing a ton of students on the types of conversations happening every day on campuses around prescription drugs. We also have a lot of those knowledge pieces in here as well around proper storage, overdose, what to do if you're concerned about a friend of yourself, and resources available on campus. It's a great program. It adds to what we already started with bystander skills, goal, really setting goals for yourself, and some of the other pieces we did in our alcohol and other drugs program. Our other one, and I'm going to have Darren also talk a little bit about this if you go to the next slide, on our Cultivating Inclusive Communities. Here we really wanted to focus again on, as Darren talked about, that inclusion, that belongingness, but we wanted to focus in on the types of conversations that are happening on campus. This one we specifically modeled between a faculty and a student. The student is coming to that faculty or staff member, you can play it as either, because something happened, there was a conversation, they said something, And now you, as a faculty or staff member, are able to negotiate that conversation with that student and help them walk through how they go through thinking about that, what happened in that moment, reframing and thinking through intent versus impact, and really helping them walk through what that looks like all the way to a point where they are able to decide, okay, what are next steps for me? I think it's really important that we started our DEI programs with that type of conversation where faculty and staff are taking a role as a leader. They're able to model these skills, and then we're going to continue to build upon that as we build out more and more conversations within this portfolio. Darren, I'd love to have you add a little bit. Darren was extremely important in leading the development of this program. So turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so one thing we definitely want to highlight when it comes down to cultivating inclusive communities, which is geared towards faculty and staff. At the heart of this was this idea of growth mindset. And what we mean by that is no matter how much experience you have in the field or even in that topic, there's always something to learn when it comes down to having effective conversations. What's built into this is those communication techniques. We have as, tell, as that is particularly useful when it comes down to this conversation. But we wanted to show the different ways in which a conversation can unfold. What also was very important is that there's no wrong pathway when it comes down to this conversation. We wanted to show that there's multiple different ways that a conversation like this can flow. Also coming with how you wrap the conversation up, whatever next steps means for you. And that could be a plan of action. It could be educating yourself. It could be thinking about how do you restore that relationship and repair the harm that was done, restore those relationships. And so it's really meant to lean in with curiosity, but also create space for someone to share. The other piece about it, we have the actual practice conversation, but there's some what we call didactic episodes that is within the simulation, and that almost tees it up. We want to make sure that we give learners the information that they need to go into a practice scenario with the skills that they are going to exercise, but also sharing different narratives around conversations or instances where harm may have occurred and what was not proper course of action, but what was a course of action that showed someone that they cared and that they mattered. So I mentioned before that it really is about creating those environments where people can connect across difference, but also understand how can we build effective relationships and really think about who people are and also what are the goals of connecting and how do you want to support them with the challenges that they present to you. And a lot of times when it comes down to these scenarios, there's two different modes. Some people are like, I'm going to attack it head on, which, yes, that is an approach and great if you feel comfortable doing that. And there's a way to effectively have the conversation so that learning happens. And then there's this other approach where you don't want to say the wrong thing, so you don't say anything at all. And how does that impact a student feeling heard and seen when it comes down to what they are experiencing? So there's a number of different ways that this simulation itself can apply in the higher education context. And you will see that and experience that when it comes down to that simulation, and wrapping up with a strong commitment on what role do you want to play in creating that environment where the culture of care is high and a sense of belonging is strong.
Thank you so much, Darren. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that we are doing is continuing to build out some of these topic areas, but we're specifically building on the communication skills that we've introduced in other programs. One of the things I'm really excited about is the Sexual Misconduct Prevention for Faculty and Staff program. It is going to cover Title IX. It is going to cover harassment and discrimination prevention. It's also going to focus very, very strongly on what does it mean to foster those positive environments. So both in the workplace, as well as continuing on some of the conversations that we started in cultivating inclusive communities around what does that mean also for students. There's going to be 2 practice scenarios in there. Again, we're going to have one that is focused on what does a trauma-informed conversation look like with a student who discloses either sexual misconduct or potential sexual misconduct. And that's really important. We're really focusing on how do we avoid secondary trauma? How do we make that student know that they've been heard and believed? And how do we move that to the next steps while giving that student agency on what next steps are? That is something that we have also done in our sexual misconduct prevention program for students, and really focusing in on those specific skills and making sure that it's trauma-informed, the person who is disclosing has agency in those moments, but also covering what is needed for Title IX. And that can be, a space where it's hard to know how to navigate that. And this takes out a lot of that complexity for faculty and staff, makes them feel that they know how to have those conversations, and is really going to make sure that when those happen, they're done in the best way possible. The second practice scenario really builds off some of the skills that we taught in cultivating inclusive communities, including Ask, Tell, Ask, which is a new one that we have introduced for faculty and staff. And that's because here we want to identify and potentially prevent harassment by using bystander skills. But we're modeling it as a conversation between 2 peers. And one peer is going to approach another peer about something that they said does not rise to the level of potentially harassment that needs to be reported to HR. It's the type of things that might get said that lead to an environment that does not feel inclusive, does not feel appropriate in those moments. We all know those types of conversations happen every day. We modeled this off of, we did a ton of interviews on this and modeled it off of one that we heard was very typical. And you get to use those skills to talk to a peer about what it means to make those positive environments, and do it in a way that keeps them from shutting down, becoming defensive, and keeps that conversation very positive. So we are moving the dial on creating those types of environments that we're focused on here, where everybody feels like they belong, it's inclusive, and it is free of harassment and discrimination. We're also building a program around child abuse, neglect, and trafficking. Many faculty and staff are required to take this program. We know that many of the ones that are out there are very knowledge-based, which is great. There are certain things you need to know about how to identify potential abuse and neglect. But where we were really hoping to make a difference is, again, what does a trauma-informed conversation look like in this moment? If you identify a potential student that you are concerned about, how do you approach them? How do you use some of the skills that we have taught around using open-ended questions, being neutral? And it also is really based on this idea of it's not your job to investigate either. So what does that look like? Where is that line? And how do we move through to this place where the student knows that you've listened? Because we know if there's trust in that relationship, if they feel listened to, they're more likely to open up. So if they are referred to a counselor or social worker or someone else who will take those next steps, they're more likely to open up and really prevent continuation if there is abuse or neglect, interrupt the move towards trafficking, which usually is part of a process that somebody's putting in place. So the ability to interrupt that. We're very excited about that one. That's also going to have 2 practice scenarios because it's age banded. So how you would have that conversation with somebody who is in, their early adolescence is going to be very different from how you would have that conversation who is, in their later years in high school or moving into college. So we've done it to model both of those conversations. So those are both coming in 2022. And again, we're really focusing on some of those core communication skills and those practice scenarios that can really help improve those environments, interrupt abuse and neglect, and bring it back to how do we move the dial on and changing the behaviors that influence the campus. So I will turn it back over to Darren.
Yeah, Yeah. So, and I think Jennifer may close us out, but we are giving everyone the opportunity to experience the simulation. It's one thing for us to talk about it, about what it is and what the simulations are. It's another thing to experience it firsthand, and we really want you to get the feel of what the intent behind this is, but also the impact that it could have. And so having that firsthand experience and immersing yourself within the technology and the topics would be very beneficial for you. I will say there's a number of different use cases if you're thinking about, well, how would this fit and in what ways can we use it? So we find that our institutional partners are thinking very innovatively about how to utilize Kognito trainings. The great thing is it can stand alone as its own training and development platform, but it also can complement any solution that you have that is focused on these topics due to the nature of it being really practice-based. So we have some folks that have it purely as online. Some people choose a hybrid when they do it online, but they also have a small group discussion as well. And so some people use it in orientation and pre-matriculation. Some people embed it in their first year experience courses. Some institutions go through their faculty teaching and learning center for faculty development. And also it could be done through HR as well, through any compliance requirements or any training and development opportunities within that office. So we found so many different ways, and we would love to share what those are. And so I'll pass it to Jennifer to close us out and give further instructions.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Darren. That concludes today's webinar presentation. We do invite you to trial any of the products that you see here on the screen. They will be available for free trial access until March 31st. Alternatively, if you would like a more personalized one-on-one product demonstration, please contact us and a local sales representative will be happy to conduct a virtual product demonstration. And lastly, we also invite you to follow us on social media. We're quite active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where you can find out more about new products, any industry events that we might be at, or when we might be hosting our next webinar. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the week.